Hi, and welcome to the Frog Pond School of Design, where we talk about things that kind of have to do with architecture in one way or another. We've been talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, compliance with that. So today I'd like to talk about detectable warnings. Now, if you know what those mean, I know you've seen them. They're around everywhere outdoors, and there's these little bumps. And you see them where there are curb ramps and that sort of thing. These guys have an interesting history in the ADA. They were proposed with the initial guidelines, and then a lot of people said, "Well, why are the requirements for this so specific?" I mean, look at this. They show you the spacing of all these bumps, the height. They refer to them as truncated domes because I guess that's what they are. If you look closely at the profile here, you can see that it would be a dome if they hadn't chopped the top off. But everything about this is so specifically governed by the code that people said that's just a little bit too specific. Why can't we do other kinds of textures? And so they kind of held off on that, and a lot of installations were done with alternative approaches. And it took a few years before they finally came back and said, this is what we want. We think this texture needs to be recognizable, needs to be consistent, and people who need it need to know it when they find it. So what is it and why is it there? Essentially, it's a substitute for a curb. When we create a curb ramp, a curb cut, whatever you want to call it, to allow someone, say in a wheelchair, on a walker, or with any kind of mobility limitation, who would have difficulty navigating a curb, we make that easier for that individual. But the sight impaired individual, someone who is blind or nearly blind, needs the curb to tell them that they're about to enter a vehicular way where there could be hazards. So without the curb, something is needed to tell people where they are and what they're getting into. And that's where the truncated domes, the detectable warning pattern, comes in. So you'll see it at curb cuts. You'll see it at maybe outside of a shopping center or supermarket where you're entering the traffic way, but because people are pushing their wheeled carts, they don't want a curb along there. So this is the substitute, and that's why it exists. Now, the question is, how do you do it? You can get concrete pavers with this texture on it, and originally a lot of people thought, oh, that's really great. But there's also a requirement for visual contrast. I said blind people or nearly blind people, they want this material to have a visual contrast with the concrete or whatever around it. So you put the pavers there, everything's fine, except those guys have a tendency to fade, and in a few years you're faced with restaining them, replacing them, doing something or other. So we kind of went through the concrete paver phase and out the other end and decided we need something different. Well, real brick material, real brick pavers are also available with the texture, and they don't fade. So you try them, right? Now, they're not very durable. They wear off, they grind off. If there's any vehicular traffic going up and down those ramps or wherever these things are, particularly snow plows, they grind those little bumps off in no time. So the real brick material, fired brick, didn't work either. And then they came up with really what this is a hard plastic material available in 2 or 3 really gaudy colors. Boy, they've got contrast. They are effective. They work, and you see a lot of them. You see them a lot of places. My preference, though, is the cast iron. It is dark enough to have the contrast with a light concrete next door to it. And it ends up reading kind of like a manhole cover reads, you know. So you sort of accept that as more of a natural material than the bright yellow or red that the plastics are in. So this is kind of where my preference lies with these things. You get the visual contrast. It's zero maintenance. It stays. These things are durable as can be, and they're not gaudy. They don't jump out at you, but they're still effective, and they maintain the texture that's required. So that's kind of the history, the purpose of the truncated domes, the detectable warning, as the ADA refers to it, and some of my thoughts on how best to accomplish it. So thanks for joining us today on the Frog Pond School of Design. Hope to see you hanging around the pond again real soon.